Let's begin with the foundations. Welcome to another lecture. Today let us discuss I Will Always Love You, a composition that, despite its apparent simplicity, has generated one of the most complex cultural afterlives in modern popular music. I'm Professor Alexei.
Hello, I'm Priyanka. I'm Professor Alexei's teaching assistant.
To frame our discussion, it's important to understand the authorial intent. I Will Always Love You was written by Dolly Parton in 1973 as a farewell to her mentor and business partner, Porter Wagoner. Not a quarrel, but a courteous parting, signaling gratitude alongside resolve to pursue an independent path. Recorded in June 1973 at RCA Studio B in Nashville, the 1974 single presents a restrained country ballad that privileges clarity of lyric over ornamentation. In technical terms, the piece is in common time at approximately 66 beats per minute. This patient tempo permits expansive phrasing and dynamic control, which, as we shall see, is a crucial precondition for the song's unusual adaptability across genres.
Professor, may I ask something simple first? When we say adaptable, do we mean the same melody can be scaled from just a guitar to like a full cinematic arrangement without breaking the song's feeling?
Precisely. The harmonic progression is straightforward, the tempo is unhurried, and the melodic arc is legible enough to support, if you will, both intimacy and spectacle. Parton's original reading is spare, with the idiomatic textures of pedal steel, fiddles, and piano. Whitney Houston's later version escalates the same core material into orchestral pop grandeur, and still later, dance adaptations extract the melodic skeleton and place it over high NRG rhythms. Structurally, nothing essential breaks. Moving forward, why does this matter? Because the song, especially via Houston's iteration, became a global benchmark for sales and airplay. Its influence reshaped expectations for power ballads in the 1990s, while, somewhat ironically, obscuring the song's original professional farewell context under a more broadly romantic interpretation. That tension between authorial origin and popular reception is, arguably, the center of gravity here.
So yeah, moving on. Could we set the timeline quickly, like the basic landmarks?
Of course. Parton wrote and recorded the song in 1973 and released the single in March 1974, backed with Lonely Comin' Down. It reached #1 on the US Billboard Hot Country Songs that year. And notably, she achieved the rare feat of reaching #1 again, with a 1982 re-recording for the Best Little Whorehouse in Texas. In between and beyond, we observe sustained recognition. For instance, a 1975 CMA Female Vocalist of the Year for Parton, and decades later, preservation in the US National Recording Registry in 2020. Then the inflection point, Whitney Houston's 1992 interpretation for The Bodyguard. That version spent 14 consecutive weeks at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, top charts in 34 countries, was the world's best-selling single of 1992, sold over 40 million copies worldwide, and ultimately won Grammys for Record of the Year and Best Female Pop Vocal Performance in 1994. In simpler terms, A Country Farewell became a world-conquering pop standard. On a personal note, when I first encountered the Houston recording in a crowded cinema, the prevailing interpretation among my companions was purely romantic. Years later, teaching about authorship and rights, I played Parton's 1974 version back-to-back with the 1982 re-recording, and a student said, "Oh, now I hear the professional goodbye." That moment, to some extent, crystallized how arrangement choices modulate narrative perception. This brings us to three larger questions. First, the historical why. Why Elvis Presley did not record the song. Second, The counterfactual what if. What if Patti LaBelle had recorded it earlier? And third, the open present. How the piece continues to resonate across genres today. Let's proceed to the first. Historically, Elvis expressed interest in 1974. Colonel Tom Parker, however, insisted on a standard Elvis condition, 50% of the publishing rights. Parton declined. As she later put it, she cried all night but kept her rights. Decades later, this decision was vindicated in spectacular fashion, when Houston's version generated extraordinary revenues and accolades. Parton has even joked that she made enough to buy Graceland. The underlying lesson is doctrinal in music economics. Ownership of publishing confers both control and a durable income stream.
Professor, I'm curious about the implications. If Elvis had recorded it with that deal, would Parton's longer-term bargaining power have been reduced beyond just the money?
Fundamentally, yes. Publishing is not merely a revenue share. It is governance over the composition. Surrendering half would have constrained licensing latitude later. Certain uses might require more complex negotiation or could be declined. By retaining full publishing, Parton preserved her ability to authorize, for example, future recordings, film placements, and derivative arrangements on terms consistent with her artistic and financial interests.
Professor Alexei, may I ask for clarification? How did that one decision actually show up in her career outcomes, beyond the famous joke about buying Graceland?
We can infer several channels. First, direct royalties from a record-shattering single. Second, enhanced leverage in later collaborations and re-recordings, such as the 1995 Parton-Vince Gill duet that reached number 15 on Billboard's Hot Country Singles and Tracks and earned CMA Vocal Event of the Year. Third, reputational capital as a songwriter-owner, which influences how future counterparts approach negotiation. In this context, publishing rights acted as both a shield and a lever. In conclusion for this segment, artists who control their publishing retain agency over the life of their work. They can shape where, how, and by whom a song travels. That is to say, authorship plus ownership compounds over time. Let's transition to a closely related counterfactual. Parton urged Patti LaBelle multiple times, years before 1992, to record the song. LaBelle, a formidable vocalist, later regretted not doing so once she heard Houston's rendition. If LaBelle had recorded it in the 1980s, what might have changed?
What if we thought about it like this? If LaBelle had made a definitive version in the 80s, would The Bodyguard have chosen a different anchor ballad? And then, like, pop ballad history nudges sideways.
Arguably, yes. LaBelle's timbre and gospel-infused phrasing could have established an earlier pop standard. In that scenario, The Bodyguard's music supervisors might have faced a different calculus: license an existing definitive reading or pursue an alternative vehicle for Houston. The cultural signature that became Houston's calling card might have attached elsewhere. The soundtrack's commercial arc could have shifted, and the sonic template for 1990s power ballads might have registered slightly less orchestral swell and slightly more R&B forward ornamentation. None of this diminishes Houston's unique capabilities. It merely recognizes path dependence in pop canon formation.
From a different angle, are there other artists whose versions already nudge the trajectory, even if not definitive?
Indeed, we see Linda Ronstadt's interpretive presence, a notable 1995 Parton-Vince Gill duet, catalyzed by unsolicited airplay after a televised Opry performance, and, in a different lane, Sarah Washington's 1993 High Energy cover, which reached number 12 in the UK and number 3 in Spain, with London's Capital FM providing heavy rotation and critics describing it with some delight as an I Will Survive-ish remake. Television also matters. Amber Riley's Glee performance in 2012 reintroduced the ballad to a younger cohort, and Kristen Chenoweth's 2019 duet with Parton bridged Broadway and country. Such iterations collectively demonstrate that covers do not merely reflect a song's status, they actively sculpt it. So the counterfactual takeaway is simple but durable. Interpretive timing plus platform context can redirect canon. A label version in the 1980s might have preempted the definitive pop claim. Houston's 1992 reading instead fused song and cinema at precisely the moment global pop distribution could magnify it most. On to our next point, the open present-day question of why the song continues to resonate across genres. Technically, we've noted tempo and structure. Culturally, we should add what Curtis W. Ellison observed about shifting gender expectations. The lyrics "Respectful Goodbye," initiated by a woman, without recrimination, aligned with evolving relationship norms, which helped the song cross from country niche to pop universality in the early 1990s. Once a ballad is experienced as universal rather than local, it becomes infrastructure for multiple genres.
Professor, could you clarify what keeps it relevant now? Like in an era of short clips and streaming algorithms?
We observe at least three sustaining forces. First, institutional validation. National Recording Registry preservation in 2020. Rolling Stone ranking among the 500 greatest songs in 2021. Billboard's 2023 list of the 500 best pop songs, placing Houston's version inside the top tier. Second, cumulative airplay and ubiquity. BMI has credited the song with over 10 million broadcast performances, which normalizes it across generations. Third, continuing recontextualization. From the 2016 Forever Country medley, debuting at #1 on Hot Country Songs, to periodic stage tributes, to social media fragments of that climactic modulation which, even in isolation, communicates catharsis.
It makes me wonder about culture shifts. Do we think the polite, mutual respect tone is still the draw? Or is it more about the big emotional release people want right now?
Both, I suspect, and the duality is strategic. The lyric offers a dignified exit. The arrangement, especially in Houston's version, offers a maximal emotional apex. In behavioral terms, it satisfies listeners who value narrative maturity and those who seek effective intensity. That ambidexterity explains why the composition tolerates translation into dance formats without semantic collapse. Sarah Washington's club version reframes the farewell as empowerment, yet the melody remains instantly legible. Areas for further research are not trivial. For example, quantitative studies of how key change ballads perform in streaming-era skip dynamics. Comparative analyses of publishing control on cross-genre licensing rates, and ethnographic work on how audiences reinterpret farewell lyrics as romance when exposed to cinematic context. These are not mere curiosities. They inform how we understand catalog durability.
Maybe it's just me, but the chess analogy pops up. Like, Parton controlled the center by keeping publishing, and then every later move had better lines available.
Well, as a matter of personal bias, I endorse any chess metaphor that ends in a winning endgame. To summarize, I Will Always Love You is at origin a courteous professional farewell from Dolly Parton to Porter Wagoner. A country ballad in common time at an unhurried 66 beats per minute, whose structural economy makes it highly adaptable. Historically, Elvis did not record it because Parton declined to surrender half the publishing, a decision that preserved control and revenue, later validated by Whitney Houston's epical 1992 recording. Counterfactually, a Patti LaBelle version in the 1980s might have rerouted pop ballad history. And, in the open present, the song endures because it marries lyrical grace to flexible musical architecture, continually refreshed across country, pop, and dance contexts. For those inclined to continue, consider studying Jolene next. Written in the same creative orbit, it offers a contrasting narrative lens on agency and desire. This concludes our lecture for today.
Thank you, Professor.